What are co-managed IT services? Most of us are familiar with managed IT services, so what is the difference and when is one better than the other? We asked Steve Arndt and Greg Shenefelt of Silver Linings Technology to explain the differences and answer some questions today on Small Business Talks. Today we're going to be talking about what is co-managed IT. How does it differ from traditional outsourced IT services? To help us understand this better, we have Steve Arndt and Greg Shenefelt. Steve is the president of Silver Linings Technology, and Greg Shenefelt is the customer service representative. So let's start off with the big question. Can you give us kind of an example of what is the difference between co-managed IT and, say, managed IT? Give us a definition or explain what the differences are there.
Yeah, so typically managed IT or outsourced IT, the entire IT department or the operational part of the IT department is fully transferred or contracted with another company like Silver Linings or somebody else. So they become IT for the organization. Co-managed is really a hybrid where you have internal IT staff, typically leadership, but it could be any sort of operational components that are internal, and you are also making use of external resources, not on a one-off project basis, but on a contracted routine basis for specific functions. Does that make any sense?
Actually, it does. I'm going to follow up with that and say that, let's say I'm somebody with an IT background already. Why would I consider partnering with a co-managed IT provider?
It's a great question, and it's especially good because a lot of IT leaders, especially in small or mid-sized organizations where they've been around for a long time, feel threatened by this because they think that the co-managed provider is going to take over their job, and it's really not the case at all. In the smaller or mid-sized shops, a lot of times you don't have the breadth of IT knowledge. And what I mean by that is IT touches everything, and typically it takes at least 4 different skill sets within an IT organization to really adequately cover all of the bases, let alone all of the technology. So whether it's server administration, network administration, strategy, project management, just day-to-day help desk. The smaller mid-sized shops tend to get overwhelmed with that and focus on really daily operational challenges rather than potentially serious strategic issues that need to be addressed by them as well. So it's, again, if you're bleeding, you want to get the Band-Aid, but you don't realize that you're in the lane to get hit by a car, right? So that's great, you solved the bleeding problem, but
It's about specialization too. It covers you in a lot of different areas. Maybe your managed provider has tons of strengths, but one system isn't their specialty, and it is the co-managed partner specialty. It keeps you up and running and smooth.
So let me ask you this. How many people think they're adequately covered right now? People you deal with when you talk to them, how many people say, well, we don't need it. We're pretty much adequately set. I'll say that as what percentage of people say that? And 2, what is it that makes them change their mind?
Almost every shop says that they're covered. Let's say 85 to 90% think that. Certainly, there are some percentages that are. I'll tell you what changes their thinking. Unfortunately, right now it's around security and compliance. Some event comes up and either demonstrates to them that they are not as secure as they thought, or again, there's some compliance and there's this knowledge gap of what they thought they were supposed to cover. And in a lot of cases, this is unfortunately a gap between the IT and the other leadership or operations component in the business, right? So a CEO, CFO, they don't know IT, and so they just assume IT is taking care of all these things, including security, compliance, and all that sort of thing. And then we've run into many cases where the IT leader is really more a tactical operations person, whether networking or server admin, but they're really downward focused on keeping the lights on, and not as focused on things like security or compliance changes or things like that. And then, of course, there's some sort of event or aha moment where the two come together and realize that the gap is bigger than was expected, which is unfortunate.
Right, because
So
many times everybody loses sight of what's changing all the time in these environments that are dynamic with security, compliance components.
that's a good point. I think one of the things I want to ask is, could you make some recommendations or kind of help a company as they're listening to this, as they're saying, I wonder if we're okay? How would a company gauge their performance that they're currently getting to kind of like make a checklist? I mean, a checklist is the wrong word, but what are some of the things they should maybe do?
Set a meeting with Steve.
This is where we are.
So here, I think this is a great exercise for the IT leader as well as the business leaders in the organization. Okay, is identify what you would call your critical operational systems, right? Is it your ERP or your CRM or your MRP, or quite frankly, your time and attendance system, right? So identify those, and typically you're going to get to 5 on your list, and in many cases this will sound crazy because in the old days this was never the case, but quite frankly now, email, whether it's Office 365 or Google Workspace, has become a critical application. So identify that short list, and then as the business leader, you need to ask yourself, how long can that application be down before you lose money? And what is your expectation for it to be back online if it does go down? And then the IT leader does the same thing, and you compare those two things. And in most cases, we recognize that there's a gap right there, that the expectation of IT in terms of backup and recovery is a much longer threshold in reality than what operations believes it is. So right there, you've already identified a gap, which peels apart a whole bunch of things besides co-manage and all that. So it's just a whole different layer, but that then will give you a recognition that IT may not be functioning at the level that organization expects it to. And then what do you need to do to change that and identify if there's other gaps besides that, i.e. security, compliance, blah, blah, blah.
So it's a good place to
start.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's a good place to kind of start. And from that, it's probably going to uncover other things as we go through and have that discussion.
Correct. And I want to emphasize that exercise does not necessarily mean you have bad IT. Okay. So really want to bring that point home, because IT has changed and its touch on everything has grown so much more that sometimes, IT leaders doing what they're doing or keeping up just have not recognized that gap has grown so much more, and the reliance on the systems has grown so much more. And conversely, like I said, many outside of IT just have this perspective that it's being handled, right? Somebody's got it taken care of, da 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 da. So it's really more of a you don't know what you don't know kind of thing.
I agree, and like I said, like you said, it's not saying you have a bad system, but it's not a bad conversation to have, so that if it is fine, then you've at least addressed it and there's not something on there. But B, it may not be that it's completely terrible, but you can see what's missing, or it may be the opportunity for IT to make them aware of just what they cover.
There's another simple exercise, and we're talking about healthcare, and quite frankly, most healthcare is 24/7 by 365. Does your IT staff work 24/7 by 365? If they don't, there's a support gap. So that's a really simple place where a co-managed IT can help out and say, look, we know you need to go on vacation. We know that you need to have weekends off. Let's have an outsourced help desk cover those times so you're not burned out.
While also relieving pressure on your organization, right? The worry about, what if said person is on vacation? You have that backup, awesome skilled team that can cover that for you in a heartbeat.
And of course, it's always better to do this proactively than to wait to you don't have an IT person anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
that's
worked in the
certainly.
manufacturing world for over 30 years, and I laugh because I've had people that the guy quits and they're like, okay, we need to hire an IT person. And it's kind of, you really shouldn't have, you should have had this talk before now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even then it's discovery of passwords or we got to reset systems to get access. I mean, it gets very, very messy. I certainly tell my team in any role that you're at, the best thing you need to do is find somebody that can replace you. And, the instantaneous reaction is that's threatening, but it's really the opposite. And as I've grown throughout my career, I realized that if I can replace myself, I actually make myself more valuable and end up focusing on higher value contributions to the organization. And I think that's really true of internal IT when they bring in co-managed, that they find that they now can actually be in conversations and have the time to do things and work on things that are really low value in terms of the impact to the organization.
I want to address, because you brought this up in your previous point, given the sensitive nature of the healthcare data and the increasing threat of cybercrime, how does co-managed IT specifically address these unique security and compliance needs of, let's say, skilled nursing or senior living facilities?
So that's a kind of a complex question. Let me start with this: is every co-managed contract is different. So we can't just sit here and say, well, co-managed is cookie cutter. But one of the huge advantages of engaging a co-managed provider is to look at the gaps that you as an organization have, right? So if you're focused on day-to-day operations or server management, maybe you're not focused on security. So having a co-managed provider that has the security tools and the security procedures and trainings for their staff is a real augment. And what you'll end up learning is, they can add value with, again, their software or tools to help monitor or manage the network and react much quicker, either in the identification of a threat or the remediation of a threat that occurs. And, the last thing you want is to be scrambling to figure out how to prevent or remediate something when it's going on. Again, this proactive engagement is really huge. So I believe right now, and there's lots of hype, but the reality is there too, especially with the advent of AI, propagation of tools, and we think that's great for regular business. But guess what? The bad guys are using all those same things, and so the security profile and remediating that is just as critical, even more so now than it's ever been. And having a partner that has that expertise that can augment your stuff and keep your day-to-day stuff going on is huge.
And it takes pressure off of you to always have to be proactive on your own, right? Fresh eyes spot more things than you do when you've done it for 5, 10 years and have that tunnel scope, just keeping everything running every day.
Even vendor paralysis, right? I mean, there's 50 security software vendors out there. So, if you're going to start from scratch and again, have little knowledge to go into it, yeah, you'll probably do a reasonable assessment, but boy, why not just leverage somebody that's in that all the time and knows these vendors already and can say, oh, gee, this is a much better fit for you because of A, B, C, and D.
You brought up something, and I want to kind of address this as a question. Upper level management looks at, well, IT is, they just have it as a blanket term. So I won't say, are all co-managed IT services providers the same? I'll change that and say, what is the differences and what should people be looking for in a co-managed IT provider?
Yeah, not all of them are the same, and how you use them is very different, right? Maybe you want somebody that's focused on security, or maybe you want somebody that's focused on, again, help desk augmentation. Obviously, very different functions. Some organizations may have multiple different things as well, a team. So a lot of fully outsourced managed service providers will do co-managed and can offer that variety. I'll tell you here, though, is what's going to distinguish any one of these from the others. And that's the ones that are bringing things to you as the customer and telling you sometimes the things you don't want to hear. And I don't mean just financially to run up the bill, but I'm saying you've got a gap here, you've got something here, and they're really consultative rather than
Oh,
dependent on you to ask them to do this, right? They've got to be that consultative thing. And if you're not getting that, you're probably not getting a true value out of your co-managed. Does that distinction make sense?
I think that does.
Greg, did you have a thought on that as well?
I think it also gives you that ability to, from an outside perspective, analyze and, like Steve said, just show you like, hey, you've got some shortcomings here, and we specialize in this and can help you avoid, downtime or the stopgap from hurting you in the moment when something does go wrong.
In the big scheme of things, nothing is perfect, right? We would love to, every operations would love to think, oh, IT is perfect, everything's perfect. No outsource provider is perfect. And that's okay because quite frankly, most people can't afford to pay for perfect anyway. So really what's the better discussion is reality and what do you get, what do you want, and how is that effectively being delivered or not, right? So again, that's with a help desk, right? Are we getting an instantaneous answer on the call? Well, maybe that costs this much, but I'm okay with a call back within 10 minutes. Okay, well, so that, and going back to that critical business application, that's all about everybody understanding the rules, really, right? If everybody's on the same page, there's a lot of success with and happiness within the functioning of IT.
So as time goes on, companies change, and with it are going to be different challenges, new technologies, and things like that. How can co-managed IT help in those areas? Is it just managing what it is, or can they also see like the growth, or can they help work with your changes as a business?
Yeah, I think the best answer to this is that if you're engaging a co-managed provider, typically they are working with lots of firms. So they have a much wider exposure to an industry and what's going on, and whether it's vendors or changes in the industry. And again, this is where I would say you're looking for that co-managed provider that's going to bring that information back to you because you may not internally you may not recognize it or it may not have hit your organization yet, right? AI is a good example. Oh, it's coming, it's coming. Well, gee, did you know your competitors are doing this, or these other vendors are implementing and it doesn't cost anything and people are taking advantage and you're not? Oh, well, that's much more actionable than it'll hit us someday, right? Well, the same old vendors. So again, that's exactly where another advantage of a really good co-managed provider in having a much broader sense of what's taking place in the market.
So a good co-managed provider would actually help you drive growth in that scenario then.
Yeah, if you let them. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that brings up a good point. Can you provide some examples of how co-managed IT has helped healthcare organizations?
Yeah, I think security is the brightest example and probably most pertinent right away. There's a big push now, and a lot of it driven from two factors. Number one, healthcare records have become a very valuable commodity, especially in the dark web and the nefarious things. So people getting a hold of that, and that has not just the monetary value, but then a reputational harm. So co-managed provider, and in our case, we've been brought into companies to begin to create a much better security profile and to do testing. So penetration testing is something typically not in an arsenal of a domestic IT, and somebody like us as an outsourced provider typically can get much better pricing and can interpret the results because we're dealing with it more often. There's lots of security firms out there as well, but from an ongoing, what's changed is that there's a recognition that instead of this being a one-time event that you're checking off the list as it was a few years ago, this needs to be an ongoing action. So that's really the difference between the consulting versus the co-managed, in that you're now putting into place a program that really is looking at that. And we've really seen some, number one, a push towards that because insurance providers are now giving you this cybersecurity checklist, and our clients or people in the industry are looking at this going, oh crap, what is this? Or I'm not doing this, I need to do this. So again, this recognition that there's a gap that hasn't been met. And also for us, then for our clients, we're able to help them check off the list and explain the things and give them assurances going forward that we're actually in much better shape. So that's a competitive value statement, because quite frankly, then they're getting the better insurance quotes and renewals and things like that. So, and that on the simplest thing. Now, it's not all about insurance, quite frankly. In my mind, it's also positioning them in a much better thing against the risk or the threats that are out there. So you don't know, right? It's so funny because we've had clients that say, we never use you, or we never hear from you. There's never any issues, even though we're doing things online. And I said, that's fantastic. You know, it's working then, right? And it's like, well, it feels like we're paying for nothing. No, you're paying and you don't want anything, right? Do you really want us to have to struggle with security issues and be in your face in that regards? And that's that proactive nature. So it's an interesting kind of paradigm shift about prevention that people have to get their mind around.
And this would fall into also the area of like disaster recovery, like a plan or implementation.
Yeah, it is. That's a whole, we've got to spend another podcast on that, because really that's a whole topic around cloud technologies as well, and backup, and how that whole thing has changed. But yeah, co-managed can help along that path for sure, because it's a different set of expertise. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of things, and again, different examples of how fast technology is changing, and quite frankly, what's becoming IT. Because I'll tell you what, about 5 years ago, surveillance systems weren't part of IT, and now they are. So IT directors out there, if you don't know that guess what? You own those systems, even though you don't know you own them.
Well, that brings up a good question, because given the importance of staff training and awareness in preventing security breaches and things like that, how does co-managed IT support provide ongoing education training initiatives within the healthcare, skilled nursing, or senior living facilities?
Well, again, that again goes back to that particular co-managed contract. What's the scope of it? Where does it go? But again, from somebody that then makes the leap to say, oh, gee, we can take advantage of co-managed, then you are definitely going to want to take full advantage, right? Okay, wow, you're helping us to manage this technology. Can you train us on it? Can you keep the programs in place, the policies in place, to continually advance on that? So again, this is that at its core, just supplemental expertise that's available at an ongoing basis. And from the business leader outside, right, if you do have IT transitions, this also smooths those out as well, right? So that's my delicate way of saying, gee, if your IT leadership changes, right, there's continuity.
Yeah, that's true.
On the help desk side, I think it's also that ability to we specialize in something, so you don't have to struggle to get a hold of maybe your on-site IT. You can get right to us and we can resolve and keep you compliant and trained much faster, because it's our area of expertise.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be the next thing I was going to ask. But we talked all about these different areas. Tell us a little bit more about Silver Linings Technology, kind of the focus, how you got into this, and where the expertise is, and the different types of in the healthcare and senior living and skilled nursing. Tell us a little bit more about the company and your focus on those areas. Where did that come about?
Well, so I've been a CIO in the post-acute healthcare industry, gosh, since 2000. So working within an organization, large organization, with 450 to 500 locations around the US, and then being brought in as a contract CIO for a similarly sized organization, jumping into then consulting CIO stints for another 10 years at 50 plus organizations. So from a leadership perspective, I've been involved with the IT, and I would say early on the focus, well, you have to keep track of all of this stuff, but for a long time, operational excellence tended to be the focus, because the threat landscape was not quite as dramatic as it is now. But that IT leadership perspective and what's happening and what you need to report on internally, you really have to have started in that position to recognize the bigger trends on the business. And for us, that experience to me has been able to help us drive our focus internally to do those co-managed engagements, and security being a huge area right now, compliance, and the two are not the same. So a lot of people kind of lump security and compliance together, but compliance is wearing your safety belt, but because the law says to wear it, and security is, oh, you got into an accident and you had that safety belt on and it protected you, right? So two really different focuses and mindsets around why you do those things, and who you're doing them for. So for us, having that high level understanding and then being able to drive that through the organization has been a focus since the consulting stints that have been driven into my organization to help our clients. So much so that we're starting to actually see more specialized engagements and co-managed along that. In the old days, for instance, it was really harder to get engagements aside from full service, where people are totally outsourcing to us, or occasional project work. And now the opposite is occurring, as we're seeing a lot of discussion, a lot of talk from people that are recognizing that maybe they're good at some core things, but they don't have these other skill sets, and it's safe to augment them with us. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
In fact, I was going to say this everything we've talked about so far I've been fascinated by. I mean, it's really, you've been very in depth, and I think people listening are going to get a very good understanding of that. So that brings me to the next thing is, first of all, I'm going to leave the last minute with you to tell us, is there anything we didn't cover, or something you would also like to share with the audience?
I would just reemphasize again that every co-managed contract is different, and it's not a threat. So many organizations or people will think that an outside partner is trying to take over, and that's not really the case. A good co-managed partner is really just there for that, to continue to help and augment. So I think IT leadership needs to have a shift in mindset, and I think company leadership should be sensitive to the IT leader if they present it in there and say, this is a management. And there have been a couple stints, honestly, where our role as co-managed is to smooth things out, but also to mentor. Right? My CIO experience has been brought in to be a guide and a resource on a routine basis for IT leadership, which is makes perfect sense economically, right? Instead of an organization bringing in a high six-figure income person on a permanent basis, they get this little snippet and can grow their existing staff. I mean, what a wonderful win for both. The organization getting much more intelligence and the staff person growing and becoming more valuable. So definitely look at this as an opportunity for the organization to maximize value and resource utilization.
Well said.
Yeah. I think a good co-managed partner is also somebody that can just help keep you proactive. Your co-managed partner should always be asking, hey, is there anything else I can help you with as I'm fixing it? Or, hey, this thing popped up. Let me make sure we're good in the related areas here. But keeping everybody aware, it's better to be proactive than reactive every time.
Absolutely.
So how is the best way of getting in touch with you? If somebody's listening and they said, this makes sense, I'd like to talk to these guys. What's the best way? Tell us a little bit how we can get in contact with you.
Yeah, so you can reach out to us on the phone, 360-450-4759, or email me directly, sarndt, SARNDT, at silverliningstechnology.com. And Neil, hopefully you can put that in some of the postings of this. Greg is gshenefelt, SHENEFELT, at silverliningstechnology.com. We'd love to hear from you. And it certainly doesn't cost you anything to get some answers to questions.
That's always a good thing to hear. And I think I would definitely get some people to start addressing us and at least acknowledging it and at least taking a look at it. By the way, we'll also put the emails and the phone number and the web address in the show notes down below. So if you're on Spotify or anything, you can just look down there and have that as well on there.
Fantastic.
Gentlemen, it has been a sincere pleasure to have you on again. Appreciate
Always
all
great to be here.
wealth of knowledge and helping us kind of guide us through this a little bit.
Thanks so much for having us, Neil.
Thanks for having us here again, Neil.
No problem. Thank you for listening. We hope this podcast was entertaining and informative and ask you to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, please contact us through the address in the show notes below.